The visual retcons to the races are completely cosmetic and have nothing to do with the plot, so it's purely stylistic. The Qunari mages apparently had their tongues cut off, yet these ones didn't. The female clergy of the chantry in the first game were called chanters, though in this are referred to as priests and never once as chanters. Raw lyrium is known to be extremely hazardous for elves and humans to touch or even be around. Here it's described as a liquid metal akin to quicksilver or something like that. Hawk has no problems touching a possessed pure lyrium idol or shard, and Knight Commander Meredith forges a huge slab out of it into a sword, which she carries around on her back for over 3 years. I'm not even going to talk about what happens to people who die in the Fade because it's so darn confusing. I mean, it's literally an alternative dimension where spirits come from. Hell, I'm going to go insane trying to analyze that. In Dragon Age Origins, Cullen either becomes a Knight Commander of the Circle of Magi in Ferelden, or he undergoes a mental breakdown and kills a bunch of mage trainees. In either case, he wouldn't have come to Kirkwall. Anders says the Blight was solved by 2 mages, but in my import I'm quite sure I killed off Wynne. Also, didn't I kill you? And you? And you? There's absolutely no excuse for this. These guys have to learn to write better. These simple solutions would have saved us lots of headache and otherwise made an okay storytelling experience go by smoothly. Develop the premise. Well, where is Hawk's rise to power? They certainly improve their lifestyle and become a champion, but where's this rise to power? There's the rise to nobility and the acquisition of a title, but where's the power? If you're the most important person in an entire country, well, what does that mean and when can I have it? This all makes me think that, well, we were missing a 4th act.
So it's obvious, well, if I'm going to become the champion of Kirkwall, why bother playing? Well, the question is, what is a champion of Kirkwall? Is there a political significance? Do I command an army? Have I got some sort of superpower that no one's told me about? And in a lot of ways, how you choose to play will help define that.
So we got together to talk about ways we could do this, the way we could tell a decade worth of history in a single game.
If the chapters are going by in 3-year bursts, and the story takes place over 7 years, and the story is about Hawk's rise to power, and Hawk has no power, then where's the next chapter? I would have liked to have seen Hawk's rise to power, using that power and then their eventual loss of it, as the epilogue implies. Being a champion doesn't give any power, it's just a title. Hawk seems to have no problem being a busybody to everyone small and high on the political scale, so what was the purpose of being the champion? It seems it's only valuable in the epilogue, and the whole rebellions in the 14 other circles don't seem to have anything to do with Hawk or their implied symbolism. Hell, even the champion armor is scattered all over the place. All this story had to do was actually show us the rise to power and what that power was. You had a premise. Use it. Have character development. I don't really have any emotional attachment to anyone here. I certainly like some characters over others, namely Aveline and Varric, since they are plot integral, but I thought this story was going to be central to Hawk, which implies character development. Yet all their family dies, they get emotional in the most ridiculous plot of the story, the death of their mom, and the relationships just seem like pandering. The 7-year time lapse doesn't change Hawk at all, or anyone. What if Hawk's development or acquisition of power was based off a relationship, and that relationship changed how they developed? Taken literally, it could be like Merrill and the Elves, Anders and the Mages, Fenris and the Templars, and so forth. Time lapses are a kind of cop-out to imply change, and it can work out that way, but again, no one changes. The time lapse is useless. For 7 years, Merrill stares at her mirror, Sebastian stares at Althena, Isabella whores and drinks herself silly, Fenris broods at a wall, and so on. This is shown to be even worse by the romances, especially the rival ones. If there's going to be character development, any kind of change would have been fine. What is wrong with Bioware not having a protagonist that changes and grows? What, does Enon Zur have to make a medley of depressing character themes to inspire the writers to write something with pathos in it? Just show us a change. Make us care about Hawk. Show their growth. If it's a story about one person and they don't develop, then what's the point? And don't give me it's a game you are the character bullshit. A proper import or none at all. Do it right, do it by having minor changes that don't occur in main plots, or don't do it at all. Hey, repeat after me, Gator. Retcons are bad. This response is completely undefendable. You cannot defend bullshit. What Gator should have written was, I'm sorry. The Dragon Age 2 team of writers apologizes for any confusion and contradiction between the two games. We just wanted to tell the best story we could, given the demands of our schedule, limitations of the game, and while trying our best to support fan feedback. It was very difficult and not our intention to alienate or insult anyone's intelligence. We did not feel the changes did so. However, if they did, we do apologize. You cannot defend a retcon. You cannot defend one outcome of a variable when it has multiple outcomes and only one is chosen. You either write a story that completely supports one outcome or addresses and subverts those other outcomes. That's all. Either do the import properly or don't have one. The 3 standard backstories on character creation was perfectly fine. I thought this was even better than the 6 origin stories from Dragon Age Origins because different subplots popped up throughout the entire story based on which backstory you chose. If there was no import, that probably would have been a better story because then the writers would be saying, this is how we're telling the tale and how it should go. Instead, it was a shoddy mechanic from a previous title that should not be named. Have better writing. Okay, I know that's a pretty generic statement, but I'm mostly addressing the one-dimensional characters or plot devices. In the main plot, this is seen with Mother Patrice's decision to kill the Viscount's son and how, Orsino just deciding to become a blood mage, Meredith in all of Act 3, the idol, and of course Anders. These elements need to be more than literary devices. Mother Patrice needed to be a character with motivations and behaviors that didn't contradict her previously intelligent plots. Orsino, who was constantly defending mages and stating that not all are blood mages, considering he's never used it before, had no reason to become a hypocrite. Meredith's situation sounded completely rational. Her insanity wasn't developed, though, and blaming the unexplained idol that becomes a poisonous sword of pure lyrium that somehow gives her magical powers it's Saturday morning cartoon crap. The idol should have had its own subplot, explaining what it was, its history, how it became a sword, and gave us some foreshadowing. Meredith's behavior and the idol raise way too many questions. In fact, there was a few subplots with the idol, but no exposition for it. Act 3 could have been a tale of redemption for Meredith, trying to save or kill her, helping her become the leader the Templars needed, and possibly failing. And then there's Anders. When he specifically needs your help, and you don't help him, what, did he just need emotional support? But if the end result happens either way, well, someone's being sloppy here. Anders' act of terrorism has to impact the plot, that is, to somehow properly address why an entire city would unknowingly want to destroy itself or call for blood because a church blew up, as well as connect to the epilogue. This would have worked in tandem with Meredith's development. So the basic rule is don't let characters change out of the blue because of a poorly developed plot. Let the plot develop not out of the blue, but because of well-developed characters. After all, a plot is the why of a story, and comes from the characters in that story, specifically the antagonist and protagonist. Consistency. This builds on the previous point. This is a problem with BioWare, probably because they're a big company and there's hundreds of people doing their little part, and no one can step back and look at the overall picture of these huge stories and do a proper editing. A proper connection of subplots that support the main plot are what I'm really talking about here. These subplots, and there's a lot, are main components to the main plot per act, and are the stories what I think BioWare really does want to tell us. But their connection, aka plot, to Hawk and the other plots usually aren't there. They're simply not connected properly. That's not a fault of the game design and the free roam sandbox concept, that's okay. It doesn't matter that there's multiple plots, let alone different ones throughout the acts. It's confusing, but we could call that a fancy term like bloated narrative or story piling or just too many threads. Considering multiple stories are throughout the narrative, that is consistent and we have to accept that storytelling method. The story just had to tell us why threads B1, B2, and all the rest were connected to get to point C, and why we had to do them. That's it. Act 1's plot is okay because it's all about money, but each individual subplot isn't introduced to us as to why it's connected, and why doing them progresses the plot. Also, you're just following map screens and journal pages, you know you're lost track of its simple, clear plot. In some of these subplots, we just magically get money out of the blue. Though the story in Act 2 is perhaps the best of them all, the plot is just disconnected, which is the same major issue with Act 3. And speaking of Act 3, just don't have stupid bosses. Just don't. Gain was great because of his character, not because he had a magical sword that transformed him into a Power Ranger or turned into a giant grotesque monster. Stop appealing to 6-year-olds and tell a story with real people who happen to be antagonists and are not at mercy to the plot. Having a dragon along the main plot would have been really good too, considering the title.